Here is the comprehensive total score of the justice subdimension. We will now move this particular element to the right side, precisely right here. Hello everyone. We're here with the 7th lesson of our SPSS series from scratch. In our previous lesson, we explained how to create a categorical variable from a continuous variable. As an example, we worked on the age and total scale score variables in our survey. The topic of this lesson, as another part of the preliminary preparations before analyses, is creating variables using formulas. Because sometimes we need to create a new variable using a formula. That's why I want to explain this as well. We'll explain our lesson again using the sample survey and the existing dataset on the screen. If you want to follow along with me, we'll continue working on the SPSS file we used in the previous lesson, which you can see on the screen right now. If you didn't do the previous lesson with us, you should download the file called Lesson 7, which is the version of this file at the end of the previous lesson. You can find where to download the file in the video description. I'm assuming you've paused the video and downloaded the file, so I'm starting the lesson. The topic of our lesson is creating variables using formulas. But before we get into that, I want to make a few quick adjustments on the screen. After these, I'll move on to our lesson. In our previous lessons, after calculating the total scale score and subdimension scores, we created 5 different variables. These variables were related to the demographic questions in our survey. I want to move these questions, these variables, up in our dataset as well, because I want my dataset to be organized in a certain order. First, I want the variables related to demographic questions, then the variables related to scale items, and finally the variables for the scale scores in that order. To do this, I can start with the new education level variable. I come here like this, and by dragging it, I can drop it under the education level variable above. I want both education level variables to be one under the other, and here in the measure section, I also want to change this to ordinal. Then, by selecting both of the place of residence variables together and holding down Control, I can move them up to a spot like this. I can move them like this. Next, I want to move the age group variable under the age variable above, and we forgot to change its measure section in our previous lessons. I want to set it to ordinal. And here, I want to move the YDO total group, which shows the total score of our scale as a group, right under the total score here, like this. In this way, I have organized my variables in a certain order. Now, we can move on to today's lesson. We said today's lesson is about creating variables using formulas. We have a scenario related to this. Actually, it's not exactly suitable for our survey here, but there is a scenario. I'll explain today's lesson based on this scenario. Here's our scenario. Previously, we calculated the total score of this scale. We calculated a total score by adding up the scores of these 9 items here, and we saved it as a variable in the row over there. Let's assume that we are going to add up these 9 items like this. After calculating the subdimensions here, we will calculate a score by weighting the scores of the subdimensions. We will use the formula you see here. In this formula, we will multiply the justice subdimension score by 3. Then we will multiply the respect subdimension score by 2 and add it, then add the benevolence score, and finally we will divide the total score here by 3. We will calculate a total score. This way we can have our scales. In some scales, the scores of certain subdimensions are predominantly used. The total score is calculated based on this. How can we briefly do this when we need to perform such a process? In this lesson, we will show you how to do that. To do this, since we will be calculating a new score, and therefore creating a new variable based precisely on the score, we need to go to the Compute Variable option under the Transform menu. That is to say, specifically the menu for the purpose of calculating a new variable. We click here. When we click here, the window we explained in our previous lesson opens on the screen. We had previously explained this window in detail. We need to enter the formula we see here into this window. Accordingly, we will calculate a new variable. First, we can briefly specify the variable's name here as weighted sum, and then we need to enter a label here. However, we won't enter it here. Later, we will copy and paste the label from within our dataset. That's why I'm skipping this part. Then, as we did in our previous lesson, we found it by selecting from All over here. After clicking on All, we found the sum option from here. Actually, we can also find it this way, and I want to remind you of that. If we click on statistical here, only this many options will appear. These are frequently used options. Among these, we can easily select sum. As you know, we double-click on the option here. When we double-click, we see that our formula appears here. So what are we going to do now? Now we're going to write a formula inside the parentheses. There's a formula here that means sum up whatever we write here. Now, what are we going to sum? Let's look at our formula. It asks us to multiply the justice subdimension score by 3. So we can press 3 here. After pressing 3, we can click the symbol here for multiplication, and then we need to find the justice subdimension variable. We can see it here. The total score for the justice subdimension is here. We move this to the right side here. Then we say plus. We can press the plus here. Now, we need to do 2 times the respect score. We can press 2. Then we say multiply, and from here, we move the respect subdimension to the right side again. Then we say plus again. After saying plus, we also need to add the helpfulness score to this. There's no need to press 1. We don't need to do this operation. We move the helpfulness score to the right side. Now we've written the top part of our formula here. Now we need to divide this by 3. But while doing this, we can't just put a 3 like this. As you might remember from math operations, we first need to put parentheses at the beginning and end here, so that it means first add these up, and after you're done, then divide by 3. We need to write a command here that means exactly that. After writing this, we don't need to do anything else. When we click OK, a new variable will be created according to the formula here. Yes, we can see the operation here, and we can see that our variable has been added here. Let's call this humanistic management approach. Let's say copy, then paste, and add a note here in parentheses saying weighted. We've added a note saying weighted, and then we can press enter like this, and I see that it's marked as scale here. There's nothing else I need to do. Let's check this. Did we do it right, I wonder? First, let's move this variable under here like this, under the total score, and here I double-click on 26. When I double-click like this, the variable here moves all the way to the left, so I brought this column to my screen like this. Now, here we have the total score, and over here we have the weighted total score. Here we see the subscale scores. Let me check it like this. 3 times the justice score makes 45. 2 times the respect score makes 18. The total of these will be 63. When I add 12 more, it becomes 75. When I divide 75 by 3, I get a score of 25. Yes, we see that the calculation was done correctly. We've confirmed this as well. In this way, if you need to calculate a new variable using a formula, or if you need to generate one, you can follow the steps we've done here. It was a short video, but I think it's an important one. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, you can ask them below the video. I wish you ease in your work. See you in our next videos.